Hello, and welcome to Our Special Lives. I'm Laura McGrath, and today we are talking about nursing. If you're a special needs parent who needs help with nursing, you won't want to miss this episode. And even if your child uses attendant hours instead of nursing, I still think you can get something out of this video. And before we get started, please hit like and subscribe. If you don't hit those buttons, the YouTube algorithm will ignore this video and it won't reach the people who may need to hear it. So I'm going to do a really brief overview for anyone who might be new to this process. The process varies a little state by state, but basically, if you have a child who has substantial and continuous care needs, you will apply for a Medicaid waiver in the state where you reside. The waivers vary by name, but once you apply, your child will be evaluated and referred to a nursing agency. The nursing agency will work with your child's primary care physician to complete paperwork, which is submitted to the government waiver administration entity in your state. And then your child will be awarded skilled nursing hours based on their medical need. So the first thing I want to say is that this process can be pretty overwhelming. Many people find that they don't have enough nursing hours. Many people find that they don't like their nursing agency. Many people find that it's very hard to find nursing even once the hours are awarded. And then some people have trouble keeping a nurse once they find them. So we're going to go through all of this today. We're going to do an overview of all of these topics, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll feel like you have a greater understanding of the whole process and how to navigate it. Okay, so let's start with the first topic, which is picking a nursing agency. When we first started this process, we were basically assigned to a nursing agency. We had no idea that we could choose. The nursing agency we got was horrible in terms of how they administered their cases, and also the nurses that they sent us were not people that we wanted taking care of our son. So I'm here to tell all of you, you have a choice in the nursing agency that you use. I would recommend, if you're new to this, starting with your child's primary care physician, or maybe even some of the specialty doctors that you have. Their nurses will be a great source of telling you which nursing agencies are good and which ones are not so good. Another choice might be a social worker that works in your child's hospital or maybe is affiliated with one of your child's medical practices. But the bottom line is you have a choice, and I would do some work to figure out which one is the best one, because otherwise I think you could really regret it, like we did. All right, the next hurdle to cross is nursing hours. So I want to start off by saying that typically it's been my experience and the experience of other people I know that you will be awarded the least amount of hours possible given your child's condition. And unfortunately, this is just the way things work with insurance, but there are some things you can do to mitigate that. So first of all, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's paperwork that is completed between the nursing agency and your child's primary care physician, and that is typically what determines the medically necessary care that your child needs. I have found that there are mistakes on this form, and I have previously not been involved in the process of double checking that form. I double check it all the time now because there are sort of critical things missing. It's not that anybody's doing a bad job, but it's just that you know your child better than anyone. So in Virginia, the way it works is that depending on what your child has going on, whether it's a feeding tube or a trach or a GJ tube, or maybe they have a TPN line, maybe they need many medications, maybe they need continuous feeding. There's a whole host of items in a child's potential medical care, and each of those items gets points. Well, if someone's leaving things off or not grading them the particular way that they need to be graded, that can leave a lot of points on the table, and that can definitely impact the bottom line of the nursing hours that you get. So when you're starting this process, I would let the nursing agency know and let your pediatrician know that you would like to review the form before it is submitted to the Medicaid administration office. I think this is a really important step, and almost no parents I know do it, and it's been really helpful for us. We've seen swings of points as much as 10 or 15 points because of some of these items. Um, the other thing I would say is that just because you're awarded a certain number of hours doesn't necessarily mean that it's not medically necessary for your child to receive more hours. And what's so important here is that you work with your child's primary care physician or maybe your child's primary specialist. For example, my child has a trach, so one of his primary specialists is his pulmonologist. And it's very important that you develop relationships with those two people because they can write a letter of medical necessity to the Medicaid agency petitioning for additional hours. And they can cite the reasons why, in their opinion, it's medically necessary for your child to receive more hours. And I think that that's one way that parents can be successful in getting more hours. If anybody feels like it would be helpful for me to do a video on letters of medical necessity or post a template, I'm happy to do that. Just reply in the comments below. Okay, the next thing that parents struggle with typically is how to find nursing. Now, in some states, it may be easier to recruit nurses because the pay scale is a little higher. I know in Virginia, where we live, the pay scale is a little bit lower. And nursing agencies seem to have a hard time filling cases. So if you go to a nursing agency and let's say you've been awarded 10 hours a day of nursing, that's great, but they actually have to have a nurse that can work those hours, and it has to be a nurse that's acceptable to you. And sometimes that part of it is a little hard to get. So, what we have found over the years works really well is recruiting our own nurses and then turning them over to the nursing agency. I don't know many people who do this, but I actually don't know why more people don't do it because we've been so successful using this process. Part of the reason it's so successful is because nursing agencies are bound by HIPAA rules when they're advertising for cases. So they can't say, an 11-year-old boy with cerebral palsy and a tracheostomy, very sweet, looking for a nurse for 20 hours a week. They can't go into that detail. So they are just kind of generally saying that they're, hiring for, 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. And, the nurse sort of has to apply on blind faith that it's going to be a situation where she's going to want to work. And typically we've had no luck relying on that system. So instead, we recruit our own nurses. The way that we do it is we use Indeed. We post an ad for the position. We post the hours. We post details. We post details of my child. We post where we live. The environment that the nurse is going to be working in. We put a lot of information in there, and we have had very, very good luck recruiting nurses. Now, when I call them, well, first, of course, I go through all the resumes that we receive. Then I call the ones where I think it might be a fit. After we talk on the phone, I explain to them that we work through a nursing agency, that they would need to be onboarded with the nursing agency, and of course, pass all the nursing agency protocols and things like that. Um, but if it still seems to be a situation which works for them and works for us, then we have them come to our house. We meet them. They meet our son, and we kind of go from there. Now, I do in Virginia. You can check all nursing licenses online. It's a free public service, so I can make sure that the nurse has a valid license and that they have no infractions on their license, crimes, that kind of thing. So at least when they come and I'm meeting them, I've done a little bit of due diligence before they arrive. Another great resource is other nurses. So when my son's been in the hospital or when he's going to the doctor or something, if I see a really nice nurse, I might say, hey, we sometimes need help on weekends, or we're looking for someone to work 8 hours a week. Do you know anyone who might be a good fit? And so we will actively recruit for nurses as we come in contact with nurses. So that's another strategy that you might want to try. The other thing I'll say is don't get married to having one full-time nurse to fill all your hours. Um, that can work, but typically it's very hard if that nurse is sick, if they need to go on vacation, if they need to be out. If you only have one nurse, it's very hard to get adequate coverage for your child. And as the years have gone on with our son, we've actually found that having multiple part-time nurses actually is really helpful, because if one nurse needs to be out, another nurse can typically cover their shifts without having too much of an impact in my child's continuity of care. The last thing I would say is that it's really important to have a PRN nurse in the mix. And what I mean by that is to have a nurse who can come if your nurse is sick or on vacation, or you have a hole or a gap, or you need extra help. Having somebody who can come in as needed is really, really helpful. And so the way that we did that is we specifically recruited for a retired nurse. So a nurse who wasn't working full time, but still had her nursing license and had the flexibility to help us as needed. We currently have one right now. We adore her. She works one shift a week and then also just works as needed. And what that's done is really reduce our stress overall, because we know that if a nurse is sick or needs a day off, that the PRN nurse can come in and help cover that shift. And, we're not constantly kind of without a nurse when we need an extra one. So the last part of this, I just want to go over some top do's and don'ts for keeping your nurse turnover low. Nursing turnover is one of those things. It's very disruptive. It's a loss of continuity for your child's care, which can be really difficult, particularly if your child is complex and there's somewhat of a learning curve in learning how to care for them. Constantly having nurses coming in and out and not having that continuity can be really tough, and it can even be potentially dangerous for your child. So I've kind of over the years accumulated top do's and don'ts for keeping nurse turnover low. And these are actually based on things that our nurses have said to me. So, these things have all happened, or they've all been rooted in something that's actually happened. And so here we go. So the first do is make sure that their working environment is organized and clean. It doesn't have to be white glove clean, doesn't have to look like Martha Stewart lives there, but things really do need to be clean and organized, because it's very hard for a nurse to work in an environment that's dirty. One of our nurses talked about a house being so dirty that she actually had to bring newspaper just to sit on the sofa, because the house just hadn't been cleaned in so long. So do make sure that the working environment is clean and organized. The next thing is make sure that you treat all your nurses with respect and gratitude. Some nurses have reported not being treated very well in certain houses, and that just never lasts. They'll leave and go somewhere else if they feel like they're not being respected. Um, do make sure that you're only asking nurses to do things that are within their scope of work. So, for example, if your special needs child, needs some laundry to be done, that's fine. That's probably in the scope of something that you can ask them to do. But don't ask them to do laundry for other family members. Don't ask them to clean your kitchen or do your dishes. It really needs to be your special needs child focused tasks. Do show your appreciation. So on a daily basis, thank your nurses for their work. They're doing a really hard job, and being grateful goes a long way, especially on tough days. Extra words of appreciation go a long way. Notes or cards or small gifts for their birthdays or holidays also are a great way of showing your gratitude and appreciation. Um, do take the time to train your nurses in the specifics of your child and the home environment. So I'm not just talking about kind of the standard plan of care that they'll get from the nursing agency, but there's always kind of nuances. And the more that you can train a nurse in the very specific details of your child, the more successful the relationship is going to be. And also just kind of things around your home. Make sure that they know where supplies are. Make sure they know how appliances work and that kind of thing. That's gonna lead to a long-term relationship. Um, do take the time to communicate with nurses a few hours, I mean, a few minutes before the shift, a few minutes right before the shift ends. And we also use a checklist because we as parents don't have access to the nurse charting system that our nurses use. So we have a very simple checklist just so that we as the parents can know that medications were given, that certain things in the care plan were completed, and it allows us to continue his care once the nurse has left. Lastly, do follow through if a nurse communicates that something isn't working or they need something or maybe they keep running out of a supply. If a nurse is communicating with you about something, it's very important that you follow through because if you don't, it just becomes a little demoralizing and the nurse might leave. A few don'ts. Don't be late in relieving a nurse from her shift. Nurses count on being able to leave when their shift ends and be there a few minutes beforehand to get the download from the nurse and then allow them to leave on time. Um, don't hire a nurse out of desperation if it's not the right fit. This and the next one, which is don't keep a nurse out of desperation if it's not the right fit, are hard to do, but in the end, you will regret it if you end up hiring somebody and they're just not a fit with your child or your family, or there's problem, a personality clash, something else. It will work out in the end if you just keep going and keep trying to find that right person. The next rule is don't ever treat a nurse like a maid or hired help. That kind of goes with what I said earlier about keeping their tasks in the scope of their work. And also, very important, make sure that all family members treat that nurse as well. So, if you have extended family or other children, make sure that everyone is on the same page as far as how the nurse is spoken to and how they're treated. Because if someone in the family isn't treating a nurse well, the chances of turnover are pretty high. Lastly, don't expect that your nurse is going to love your pets as much as you do. A lot of nurses that I've talked to are not comfortable around pets or not comfortable around pets that they don't know. So if you're getting nursing in your home, you need to be prepared that a nurse may not want your dog around at all times, and you may need to accommodate that. So I hope this video was helpful in giving you a little bit of an overview over nursing. There are many areas, of course, or side areas that we could go in with letters of medical necessity or ads that you place to try to recruit a nurse. I'm happy to go into either of those two things if you'd find it helpful. But in the meantime, good luck with nursing. It's always a little bit stressful, but if you find the right nurse in the end, it can be a really magical relationship for you and your family and your child. Thanks, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.